Hello, folks. Welcome to the Pharmacy Showcase. My name is Teresa Blackman. I am the Pre-Health Professions Advisor at UTC. I've listed my contact information as well as the location of my office. Should you have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to email me and we can set up a time to chat or set up a meeting. So the purpose of today's event is to talk about what makes a good pharmacy school application, what components you need, what information you need to have, as well as how to review pharmacy schools for best fit, because not every pharmacy program is going to fit every applicant. And then we're going to discuss in detail the pharmacy programs in the state of Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. So first we want to talk about some terms to be aware of. There are a lot of acronyms, there are a lot of there's almost a different lingo that comes when you start looking at healthcare programs. And so we wanted to make sure you're familiar with some of the most common things that you're going to see. So the first is PharmD, and this is the Doctor of Pharmacy. So this is, if you see a PharmD program or you see a PharmD next to someone's name, that is the professional doctorate that is required to go to pharmacy school and become a pharmacist. So an RPH, which is our next item, is a registered pharmacist who's a licensed pharmacist holding either a PharmD or a bachelor's in pharmacy. So this is another certification that goes along with the degree of pharmacist. So there are a couple of different positions that are underneath a pharmacist. So the first you have is that certified pharmacy technician. These are folks that are going to work directly under a pharmacist. There is some formal education, such as the certificate program, that is required. So this could be something that you would find at a local community college or through a professional education center. UTC's Center for Professional Education has a bunch of different certifications, and then local community colleges are places to look to see if you can get your certified pharmacy technician certification. So a pharmacy assistant is a little bit under the certified pharmacy tech. This just requires a high school diploma and some on-the-job training. You're very limited in the duties that you can do, but if you were looking to get experience, to shadow, to understand what it means to be a pharmacist because you're considering going to pharmacy school, pharmacy assistant position is a really great thing to look into, because then you're sort of boots on the ground, you're seeing the action, you're really getting to see what it's like to be a pharmacist. So the PCAT is the Pharmacy College Admissions Test, and this is a computer-based standardized test that prospective pharmacy applicants to take. Now, unlike the MCAT or the GRE, where most programs require you to take a test, pharmacy school and the PCAT is not the same. So to date, there's actually not a pharmacy school in the state of Tennessee that requires the PCAT for admission. Alabama, most of their programs don't require the PCAT either. So it's going to be really important as you start planning your programs that you're going to apply to, that you pay special attention to what programs do and do not require the PCAT, because the very last thing that you want to do is to assume that you do not have to take the PCAT and find that maybe one of your top choices is requiring the PCAT. And later in the presentation, I will show you how you can search pharmacy programs and review their requirements. But this is something that you do want to make sure that you pay close attention to as you're vetting pharmacy programs to see whether or not they require the PCAT. So the AACP, that's the American Association of Colleges in Pharmacy, and this is the national organization that represents the interests of pharmacy education. So these are going to be the folks that have the information on program requirements and certifications and accreditations. So they are an association to be aware of. The PharmCast, this is probably the most recognizable next to PharmD for pharmacy interested folks. And the PharmCast is the centralized application service. So this is the application that you will actually utilize as you apply to pharmacy school. Now, unlike when you applied to undergrad, where you went to the specific school, you pulled up the application, you filled it out, the PharmCast is a common app. So that means that if you apply to 10 pharmacy programs, you are filling out one application and designating that that application be sent to those 10 schools. So it's very important that when you're filling out your short answers, when you are attaching letters of interest, or when your recommenders are writing recommendations, it's not designed for a specific school, but it's focused on why you want to go to pharmacy school, because you want all the schools to give you consideration and not say, well, oh, they've indicated several times that they're interested in this specific school, so we'll let them pursue that opportunity and pursue other applicants. So just be mindful of that. So now we're going to talk about what you need to apply to pharmacy school. So the first thing you need is a GPA, and you need to have a competitive GPA because you are going up against a lot of well-qualified folks. So you want to make sure that your GPA is on point. So for the state of Tennessee, and these are the numbers from last year, from 2018, because we don't have the 2020 numbers yet, the competitive overall GPA was a 3.4. And so your overall GPA is going to be all the classes that you have ever taken, your dual enrollment, your general education, that one random psychology class you took, everything. Your science GPA is just going to be your science coursework. Traditionally, it's all chemistry, biology, physics, and math courses. However, some schools will expand that to say all prerequisite courses. So this is another thing that you want to be mindful to keep an eye out for as you're looking at program requirements for individual programs. How do they do the science GPA? And so the competitive science GPA for the state of Tennessee is a 3.45. So this is the average, these are the average GPAs of folks that applied to programs in the state of Tennessee and were admitted. So the PCAT, there is not a competitive number to give you because all of the schools that we are looking at do not require the PCAT. But again, all of the programs that will require the PCAT will talk about what the average or the minimum score that they are asking for is. So if you are looking at schools that require PCAT, you'll have access to that information. The next thing you're going to need is specific classes. Now, pharmacy school is a little bit different as it will allow you to actually start the program without having completed your bachelor's degree. Most professional healthcare programs require a 4-year degree. Pharmacy schools, not all of them do. There are going to be some differences in the classes that you take if you opt to go to pharmacy school without completing your bachelor's degree, which we'll talk about in a second. But if you're planning on completing your 4-year degree, you will need to take general biology 1 and 2, which is that biology 1110, 1120 sequence, general chemistry 1 and 2, which is our 1110, 1120 sequence again, organic chemistry, the 3010, 3020, biochemistry, chemistry 4510. You will need to take a math course. Math 1830 or 1950 at UTC is recommended because you also have to take general physics, which is that physics 1040, 1030 sequence. You have to at least have the math prerequisite for physics. Not many pharmacy schools are going to require additional math courses, but you do have to at least take enough math to take physics. In addition to the math that you need for physics, you also will need to take a statistics course, which is Math 2100 at UTC. And then there are some biology courses that they also want. Microbiology, which is 2100 or 4220. Now, the difference between the two of those is the 2100 is required of nursing students, where the 4220 is required of biology students. Now, pharmacy schools will be very clear on what their preference is, and you want to honor that. So if they recommend that you take the biology majors microbiology, then that means it's going to be strongly beneficial to you to take biology 4220 instead of biology 2100. Now, taking Biology 2100 is not going to remove you from being competitive or remove you from getting into that pharmacy school, but just know that when it gets down to maybe one available spot, that could be a deciding factor of, well, applicant A has biology level microbiology, and applicant B has nursing level microbiology, and we prefer the biology version. So again, every program is different. Look at your program requirements, but that is something that you want to consider. They're also going to require an economics course. Many pharmacy schools also require public speaking, which is that THSP 1090. And then they're going to require anatomy and physiology, which is biology 2060 and 2080. Now, I do want to make a note about HHP 2300, I believe. It is the applied anatomy and physiology course that exercise science majors are required to take. That is not going to be an adequate substitute for biology 2060 and 2080. The pharmacy programs are pretty clear that they want the 8 hours of anatomy and physiology with labs. And so that is going to be at UTC, biology 2060, 2080, or you can take an anatomy and physiology 1 and 2 at another school. But the 2300 HHP course is not sufficient to fulfill the anatomy physiology requirements of pharmacy school. So these are all the classes that you're going to need to complete if you are getting your bachelor's degree. But again, some programs may have a slightly different requirement. They may want public speaking, they may not. They may want econ, they may not. So it's always important to double check your programs and make sure that you are mindful of what they are asking you to do. And you can always set up an appointment with me to chat about the different programs, and we can make sure that all your T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Now, if you are not going to complete your 4-year degree, if you are going to enter pharmacy school, you can do so between 60 and 90 completed credit hours. Programs will differ, and they will be very clear about the number of credit hours you have to complete. So you are going to have to take a few extra courses. You're still going to need to take the biology and the chemistry, the math, the statistics, the physics, the economics, and the public speaking. But they also specifically want English composition 1 and 2. They want 6 hours of social sciences, things like psychology, sociology, political science, criminal justice, and then 9 hours of fine arts and humanities, literature, history, philosophy, music, things like that. And it is important to note that most programs want the 6 hours of social sciences and the econ. So if you're thinking about the context of UTC's Gen Ed curriculum, you would need to take 3 behavioral and social science general education courses. 2 of them would fall into the social science category, and then the third would be the econ course. And then of course the 9 hours of fine arts and humanities, most of those will fall under our fine arts and humanities general education requirements. So it's possible to get a lot of this knocked out through Gen Ed. But again, if you decide that you want to go to pharmacy school without completing your 4-year degree, it's going to be really important that you connect with me and we make sure that your timeline is solid and you're completing all the courses that you need. So there are some things that you don't need to have when you're applying to pharmacy school. You don't need an undergrad degree. As we've talked about, many programs in the state and outside the state will admit folks between 60 and 90 hours. And so there are some pros and there are some cons to this. Obviously, it's a bonus that you can get started, get through school, start your career. If you're utilizing student loans, it's less debt that you have to incur. But, there are some downsides. If you are going in at 60 to 90 hours, you are not going to get the full college experience. You won't have a 4-year degree. So what if you decide not to go to pharmacy school? Or what if something happens and you have to leave pharmacy school for whatever reason, or decide you don't like it anymore? You don't have a 4-year degree to fall back on. And so that's something that you really want to consider when you make this decision. You're also not going to be doing things like graduating with your friends and participating in, maybe some study abroad or internship things, because you'll be focused on, getting those prerequisites done and getting into the program. So there's not a right or wrong way to do this, but you just really have to think through the options and figure out what's the best plan for you. You don't need a specific major to go to pharmacy school. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to be a science major. You don't have to be a chemistry major to go to pharmacy school. Obviously, being a chemistry major is a lovely choice. It will prepare you very well for pharmacy school, but you really want to pick a major that you excel in, because they are going to evaluate you on your GPA. And if you are majoring in something you're not good at, you're not doing well in, you're not going to have a strong GPA, and that's not going to make you a very competitive candidate. And over the past 10 years, there's really been a trend across all of the health profession programs of non-science majors really having strong applications and doing really well in programs. And so admissions committees are always on the lookout for wonderfully qualified students, be they science majors or not. You don't have to enroll into pharmacy school as soon as you graduate. Obviously, you can enroll before you graduate, but you can also take a gap year. So a gap year is a year in between graduation and starting your next school. So in the UK, gap years are really common between what we would consider high school and college. But a lot of folks in the States are taking gap years in between graduating college and going on to professional graduate programs, because they want to travel. They will have internships lined up. They maybe just want a break, to take a breather before they jump into another graduate program. There are a lot of reasons why folks take gap years, and there are not looked negatively upon. Admissions programs do not look at someone who's had a gap in between undergrad and applying and say, oh, well, clearly they're not an option. Now, what you do in your gap year can help you be more or less competitive, but taking a gap year in itself is not going to be something that's going to remove you from the running. So if you need to take that year, if you need a breather, do it. If you want to participate in that study abroad experience, or if you want to take that internship, take advantage of those opportunities, because once you go to graduate school and then you get a job, you're going to have adult responsibilities, and you're not going to be able to take off and go intern in Italy for 6 months, or do the Disney college program. So take advantage of those college specific opportunities, and don't be afraid to take a gap year. Taking time off can actually work in your favor, because you apply when you're ready, not just because you're graduating. There's never a time where an admissions committee representative is going to say, well, we're going to take student A over student B because student A graduated in 4 years and then applied, and student B took a gap year. They're looking at who is going to be the best fit, who is going to be the most competent and successful candidate that they can offer a spot to. And if you've been out of school for 10 years, or if you've been out of school for 10 minutes, it does not matter. You want to make sure that you apply when you are ready. Speaking of applying, you want to be mindful of the timeline, because it's actually a little in depth, and you want to make sure that you're submitting your application at the right time in order to be considered and have people lay their eyes on it. So the entire process of applying to pharmacy school can take time. So you want to make sure that you have all your stuff prepared before you start the process. The first thing you need to do is determine what track you are on. Are you completing your degree, or are you going in at 60 to 90 hours? This is a huge thing to figure out, because it's going to dictate how long you're in school and when you apply. So first of all, you want to make sure you know when you're wanting to apply. Then the summer of your junior year, or the summer before you plan to enroll, depending on your timeline, you want to make sure you gather your application materials. make sure your prerequisites are done. If you need to take the PCAT, do that. And you want to begin filling out the FarmCAS. So the FarmCAS application opens on June 1st every year. So the ideal thing to do is to really just be ready to go. When that application opens up for that year, you can sit down and you can go ahead and fill it out. This is a lengthy application. Applying to professional school is not something that you can do in 15 minutes. So when you sit down to fill out that application, just make sure you've given yourself time. And I also want to note that most schools are going to require you to complete the prerequisites before you apply. However, there are some schools that will allow you to have a certain number of prerequisites still outstanding before you apply. So if you are planning on going in after you graduate in 4 years, you still have your physics to take your senior year. Some schools, as long as you tell them, okay, I'm planning on taking physics 1030 in this semester and physics 1040 in this semester, they will still allow you to apply to their program, provided you complete those classes in the timeline that you told them that you would. But not all programs do this. Some require all of your prerequisites done before you start. Again, very important to know the programs that you want to apply to and know their requirements. Then in early fall of your senior year, or the early fall before you plan to enroll, is when the FarmCAS applications begin to be released to schools. So when the application system itself opens up, they're not sending applications straight to schools. They are holding them. They are verifying that all the information is correct, that all the information is complete, and then they send the batch of applications off to schools starting in August. Schools can request applications be sent at a certain time. Schools can request, they trickle in or they all come in at once. But the important thing about submitting your application as soon as possible is in that initial release, if you have submitted your application, let's say middle of June, that initial release in August, you are pretty much guaranteed that it is going to go to a school and it's going to be reviewed. But if you submit your application later in August or into September, and you're not applying for early decision, which we'll talk about in a second, you do run the risk of your application not being seen. A lot of pharmacy programs participate in what's called rolling admission, where they will review a smaller batch. They will schedule interviews, they will make offers, and then they will start the process over again. And so oftentimes after 1 or 2 cycles of application, interview, offer sequencing, their class is full. So you really want to make sure that you are getting your application in as early as possible. September is going to be the deadline for early admission. And again, we'll talk about that more in a second. Then we get into late fall, early spring of your senior year, or the late fall, early spring before you plan to enroll. October is when schools are going to start interviewing. And then April 1st is when they cut off changes to the new application, changes or new applications. So that is the last ditch effort if you're applying. And some schools, they pull applications late, they get to things late. So you may have an opportunity to be reviewed, but on April 1st, that's it. And then admission offers begin to be extended anytime really between October and June 1st. It's very, very different on school to school. Some will send offers a couple weeks after interviews. Others will wait until all the interviews are done. It just depends on the program, which you'll hear me say about 17 more times. And then on June 1st, offers begin to be extended to those who are on the wait list. So it's a little bit of a process. So you want to make sure that you're ready and you've completed everything and got all your ducks in a row. But this is sort of the basic guide to what you need to be mindful of as you're going through that application cycle. So I promised we would talk about early decision, and here we are. So there is an early decision option through FarmCAS, and so all of your materials must be submitted by early September. It's generally September 4th, if I'm not mistaken, but you have to have your transcripts, you have to have your letters of recommendation, and it's not just, oh, I've identified who I want to write for me. It is the letter has to be there. And you can only submit to one school, and you have to commit to attend that school if you are admitted. So if you decide, hey, I want to do early admission to UTL Science Center, and they admit you, you have to go there. You don't get to say, oh, well, maybe I might want to go to Sanford or Belmont. Nope, you did early decision. That's where you're going. Now, if you're not awarded a seat with early decision, PharmCast will release your application on October 21st into the general application pool. So you'll be able to go in and add additional schools that you would like to apply to. You can still apply to the place that you submitted your early decision application to, and continue forward as a regular applicant. Again, pros and cons to this. Early admission means you get to know sooner, but it also does run the risk that you might be getting in later in the game if you're put in the general admission pool. And a lot of early decision applicants can qualify for scholarships. Some programs, ETSU comes to mind, they have scholarships for folks that are admitted via early decision. So that's another incentive for considering early decision, is that you may get some scholarships. So we've talked a lot about program specific, and I've said probably 16 times at this point, check on your program, make sure you know your program. So now we want to talk about how to find a pharmacy school. There are a lot of things to consider. There are a lot of options, but the biggest thing you want to consider is the location. What area of the country interests you, or international if you're looking at getting international certification? Do you have family or friends in the area? This seems kind of silly because you're like, no, like I'm an adult, I want to strike out on my own. Professional programs are very rigorous. Very few people are able to work part-time. So you are not generating much of any income. And so to have family or friends in the area, that's a support system. If something happens, if you need a hot meal or laundry done, or just someone to encourage you, having a family member or a friend in the area is really, really helpful. It's also helpful if you have a family by this point. You're going to be very busy with school. You're not going to have a lot of extra time for significant others and children. So having a support system for them is going to be really helpful to kind of keep everybody sane through the process. Another thing to consider is, can you afford the cost of living? There are some very expensive places in the country. Boston is absolutely beautiful, but Boston is incredibly expensive. San Francisco, you will pay probably 4 to 5 times what you would pay for an apartment in Chattanooga, and that apartment will be maybe a third of the size that it is in Chattanooga. So it's very expensive. And then remember, you're probably not going to be working much of at all. So can you afford to live where you go to school? And then are there incentives to stay closer to your home state? There's a lot of residency perks that states offer to their residents to keep them in state for their education. Sometimes it's reduction in tuition. Sometimes it's access to early admission or scholarship money. Other times there's a certain number of seats that are held for in-state folks, or there are less restrictive requirements. You might see a lower GPA requirement for in-state than out-of-state students. So know what programs are in your state and if that's a benefit to you. You also want to be mindful of requirements. Do you meet the school-specific recommendations and requirements for admission? This seems silly to say, but there are always a few people that will go ahead and apply to a program anyway, and they don't meet the requirements, and surprisingly, they don't get in. This is a very expensive process. You will spend probably a couple $1,000s by the time it's all said and done applying to a professional healthcare program. And you want to make sure that it's not just throwing money away. You want to make sure that you're a competitive applicant. You're in the range for GPA for that school. You're in the range for shadowing or volunteer hours. You've got the right scores. You've got the right classes, because generally we're talking maybe like 10 to 15% of the people who apply to a school get in because the class sizes are smaller. The application pool is very large. So make sure you know the requirements, you meet the requirements, you exceed the requirements before you pick that school. And then you also want to look at mission fit. What's that pharmacy school sphere of influence? Are they focused on education? Are they focused on research? Are they focused on bringing care and services to underserved communities? This is something that it is a driving force for their institution. And so they are always on the lookout for applicants that fit their mission. And so you also want to be on the lookout to make sure that your mission fits with the school as well. If you're really, really focused on research, but you pick a school whose focus is on underserved communities, it's not to say you won't have research opportunities, but that's not going to be the utmost of focus. So the opportunities that you may have encountered at a more research focused school will not, it'll be different. So you just want to make sure it's a good fit both ways. So jumping into that, we're going to talk about pharmacy programs in the state of Tennessee. The first, and probably the one that people are most familiar with, is the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, which is in Memphis. It is not in Knoxville. It is in Memphis. You will attend class in Memphis. This is really confusing because UTK does have a program where students can complete coursework as part of their undergraduate degree at UTK. And then they're also taking pharmacy school classes and then eventually going over and completing their degree in Memphis. So it confuses a lot of folks. But if you are applying to pharmacy school, you will be going to Memphis. Their class size is 175 and their overall GPA is a 3.4. So that is the competitive GPA. They do not require, but strongly recommend that you complete your undergraduate degree. And I'm going to let you guys on a little secret. Strongly recommend, or encourage. That is all subliminal messaging. They're looking for you to pick up the ball and run with it, to go the extra mile. Throughout this entire application process, admissions representatives are looking for answers to the questions they didn't ask as much as answers to the questions that they did ask. So if you do run across somewhere it says strongly recommend, it would behoove you to do that. Now you can submit your application before you complete all of your credit or your degree when you're applying to UT Health Science Center, but everything has to be completed by matriculation. So that means that all your classes have to be completed and your degree has to be awarded to you before you start. Otherwise, they will rescind your application. They will rescind your admission. They participate in early acceptance. And so this is actually this is different from early decision. So early acceptance is open to high school seniors and college freshmen who have a minimum GPA of a 2.5 and an ACT of 25 or an SAT of 1220. You are admitted to the program, and as soon as you finish all the prerequisites, you're able to start in. So if you are a first year freshman, or if you're a high school senior or junior watching this, and UT Health Science Center is one of your top picks, this is really something to look into. They participate in regular rolling admission. So this means that folks that are applying just as regular folks, they're not doing early admission or early decision. They are put through the rolling admissions process, which means seats are filled on a continuous basis, and they're continuing to do interviews until the seats are full. So really good incentive for you to make sure if UT Health Science Center is on the top of your I want to go list, that you're ready to submit that application very shortly after the PharmCast opens up. You do have to complete at least 62 hours and all the listed prerequisites to attend and to apply. So you can apply once all of your credits, once you have 62 hours and accredited for your school and you've completed all the prerequisites. So just be mindful of that. Now, the pharmaceutical sciences program, which is not the PharmD, it's the pharmaceutical science program, will be visiting us virtually Friday, November 6th from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now pharmaceutical sciences combine a broad range of scientific disciplines. It's critical to the discovery and development of new drugs, which we are very much experiencing right now as we are all watching the news and learning about all the new treatments and vaccines that they're developing for COVID. And so this is a big part of what pharmaceutical sciences do. UTL Science Center offers a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, and their program director will be coming to speak with us. Now, UT Health Science Center's PharmD program, which is the pharmacy degree, will be joining us virtually sometime in January. So to sign up for this event and also to see the dates for our spring events, you'll want to check out the UTC pre-health website, and you can access that by just going to the UTC main webpage and searching for pre-health advising. So the Bill Gatton College of Pharmacy is at East Tennessee State University, which is located in Johnson City. They have a smaller class size with 80, but their average GPA is only 3.27 and their science GPA is a 3.45 overall. Completion of an undergraduate degree is not required. There's no mention of strongly recommend, so do with this information as you will. They will admit folks after you've completed 61 credit hours. They do have additional coursework that you have to complete. So if you are planning on entering ETSU's program without graduating with your undergrad degree, you will need to complete additional coursework. And they do require Math 1830, which is basic calculus, or Math 1950, which is regular calculus. And that is something that's required of all applicants. Now, on the UTC pre-health website, there is a section called Guide Maps. And if you select the Southeast region, we do list the Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee pharmacy schools. And I do have a map out of the courses required for you to take if you are going in with your bachelor's degree, and the courses you are required to take if you are not going in your bachelor's degree for ETSU. So feel free to check that out. If you can't find it, definitely shoot me an email and I will send you the link. So as of July 2017, they no longer require the PCAT, so you do not have to take the PCAT. And early decision applicants who are extended offers are awarded a $2,000 scholarship, and the $200 deposit is waived. And that's something I didn't mention in previous slides, but I want to touch on. A lot of schools will require some sort of seat deposit. It can range for a couple $100 all the way up to maybe $1,500 to $2,000. So you want to make sure that you're starting to save for that seat deposit, because generally it's a very short turnaround, 10 to 15 business days generally, once you're offered admission to pay that seat deposit or you lose your spot. Most schools do fold that into the first semester of tuition. So let's say if tuition was $5,000 and you had to pay a seat deposit of $500, more than likely they would charge you an additional $4,500 for the semester and utilize that $500 that you paid for the seat deposit to get you up to $5,000. So again, each program is different. So you definitely want to confirm how they deal with deposits and whatnot with their admissions representatives. But if you have early decision for ETSU, you don't have to worry about that. Moving on to Belmont. So Belmont's in Nashville. They have a class size of 100, and their overall GPA is a 3.30. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, so I'll mention it now. These GPAs that I'm showing you are not the baseline to apply. These are the competitive averages. And so what this means is this is the average GPA of the class that was admitted the year prior. And so that's really the GPA that you want to shoot for, because that's the competitive range. If you were like a 295 and you were applying to Belmont, you would not necessarily be as competitive. But if you were a 3.4, 3.5, then you'd be far more competitive, because the average is around 3.3. Completion of an undergraduate degree is not required for Belmont. And they will admit you after 63 completed hours. And they, like ETSU, do have additional coursework that they require. They also require 1830 or Math 1950. They also do not require the PCAT. And the nice thing about Belmont is they make admissions decisions within a week of the interview, so you don't have too long to sweat it out. You'll know fairly quickly. For folks that apply for early decision, their interviews will be prior to October 11th. Those decisions will be made by October 18th, and then it is required of candidates to respond accepting the offers by November 1st. Now, these dates were listed pre-COVID, so definitely check out Belmont's website to make sure that nothing has changed. South College School of Pharmacy is located in Knoxville. They have a class size of 95 with an average GPA of a 3.0, and they also do not require an undergraduate degree. Now, South College does have a couple other campuses in Asheville and I believe in Atlanta, but if you're interested in South College for pharmacy for Tennessee, they're in Knoxville. They do not require the PCAT. They do require that you have to complete at least 69 credit hours from a regionally accredited college or university. So that's going to be, for those of you that are in the South, that is for you to a school that is accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Universities, or SACS, is regionally accredited, or there's a religiously affiliated certification as well. If you are concerned that some of your coursework or the school that you are at, if you're not a UTC student, is not regionally accredited, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to confirm that for you. Unlike our other programs, they don't have additional coursework that you have to complete if you're not coming in with a bachelor's degree. And they are the only 3-year Doctor of Pharmacy program in the state. They will actually be visiting us on October 13th, 2020 from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In addition to their pharmacy program, the PA and the physical therapy program will also be represented. Again, you can register for this visit by visiting the UTC Pre-Health website. Union University College of Pharmacy, they're in Jackson, Tennessee. They have a small class size of 53 and a GPA of 2.5 overall. Union is a faith-based private four-year university. So there are some different policies with private schools than there are public. And then those that are faith-based, there's a religious component as well. So they participate in an early decision PEAP program. And essentially this is something that is extended to mostly their undergraduate students. It's very similar to UT Health Science Center, where once you complete your prerequisite courses, you can start the program. They do a conditional acceptance for folks, and then it's finalized once you finish. So just be mindful of that. They do not require the PCAT, and they also espouse rolling admission, which we've talked about, what that means. Moving on to the state of Alabama. Our first school from Alabama is Samford University's McWhorter School of Pharmacy. They are located in Birmingham, Alabama, with a class size of 127. The PCAT is not required for consideration. And they will admit without you having a 4-year degree. Now, for early decision, the first 25 applicants who complete their PharmCAS and are admitted will be awarded a one-time $500 or $5,500 scholarship. And then they have additional scholarships for those that qualify. And so they will be visiting UTC virtually Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. It's a lot of 20s, from 2 to 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. Erin Hux, who's the admissions representative, will be joining us. And so if you have additional questions about scholarships from Samford, definitely be sure to join us for that event and ask him. And again, you can register for that event on the Pre-Health website. And I do want to note that all of our virtual campus visits are not recorded, so it is not something you will be able to view at a later time. So if a school you are really interested in going to is going to be visiting virtually, you may want to try and rearrange your schedule to come to that virtual event. Auburn University is our next school. The Harrison School of Pharmacy is in Auburn University, Alabama, with 151 students. They do not require the PCAT, nor do they require a bachelor's degree. The nice thing is that there's not an advantage for in or out of state residency, which is not super normal for Alabama schools. They have a lot of resident incentives. So it's nice that sort of even footing here. And then international applicants are accepted. If you are not a naturalized US citizen, a native US citizen, or a permanent resident of the US, there are going to be some programs that may not admit you. So it's really important to pay attention to residency requirements. And then again, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can find what schools will be best fit for you. So moving on to Georgia. Our first school is Mercer University College of Pharmacy. They're located in Atlanta, Georgia. They do not require the PCAT, but scores can strengthen the application. So if you are worried about your GPA or you feel like your application isn't very strong, you can take the PCAT to help strengthen it. They do not require the bachelor's degree, but Mercer is really lovely. They visited us a few times over the past few years. They were here virtually earlier in the fall term, and they are really excited about helping students. So if Mercer is at the top of your list, definitely reach out to me and I can connect you with their admissions folks, because they are more than happy to review your application and kind of give you a good gut check of what your chances are, where you stand, how you can improve your application. I can do it as well, but if you're really focused on going to Mercer, then it would be something to look into for sure. The Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine has a Georgia campus, and on that campus, they have a school of pharmacy. The campus is located in Sewanee, Georgia, with a class size of 91. They don't require the PCAT. They don't require a bachelor's degree, but here's that messaging, but they strongly prefer it. And then they recommend pharmacy observation hours. So early in the presentation, we talked about pharmacy assistant. That would count as observation hours, or just shadowing a pharmacist, reaching out to maybe a local pharmacist that you know, and asking if they would be open to allowing you to shadow them for a few hours a week. It never hurts. Make sure you want to be a pharmacist. South University School of Pharmacy is located in Savannah, Georgia. They have a class size of 114. They don't require the PCAT or a bachelor's degree. They do recommend observation hours, and this is another school where international students are eligible for admission. Our final school is the University of Georgia College of Pharmacy, and this is our only school that requires the PCAT. They're located in Athens, Georgia, with a class size of 140, and they require the PCAT. So make sure that you take the PCAT if you are interested in University of Georgia, and a competitive score for them is 76. They do not require a bachelor's degree for consideration, and they are the largest and only public college of pharmacy in the state of Georgia. So there's a little fun fact for you. That concludes today's presentation. Again, I'm Teresa Blackman. I am the Pre-Health Professions Advisor at UTC Chattanooga. And if you have any questions, concerns, or you would like to set up an appointment to talk about your specific pharmacy application, I am happy to do so for current students, prospective students, and alum. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe, everyone.